All right, let's talk about the things that make a drum kit believable and how to write a good drum kit for your track. Say, for example, you have a track like this one. Yeah, pretty cool, but without any percussion or drum kit underneath it, it sounds like it's lacking something. So I actually added, the drum kit or percussion, whatever. But I want to show you how I did that step by step. Now you can totally get a library like Superior Drummer 3, and that comes with like grooves and stuff. The cool thing about this one is that you can actually take the loops and import them in your DAW and MIDI format and play around with them. But what I want to do now is to tell you guys what I think about when I write for rock percussion or rock drums. So you can do that even without having to use loops, but it's not bad to use loops. Anyway, so the first thing you want to do is to think of an element that you want to write the drums for. So what I do is like, usually I write drums correspondingly to the bass. So the bass line in this track is this one. It's very simple, synthesizer bass. And what I do is I'm like, okay, this is the bass line. I'm gonna have to write a rhythm that works with that. So I start with the kick and snare, which are the two most foundational percussion. So I wrote this one, which is pretty cool, but it's pretty freaking boring. Now, the reason for it is that it's just copy-pasted to infinity. You don't want that. What you want to have is a bit of spiciness, because no drummer would like to play like that. So what I did is adding a bit of variation every so and so. So this is what it became. So basically, every second and every fourth bar has a variation. Now, the other thing you might want to add is the closed hi-hats. So basically, here I'm just adding the closed hats on top of this, just as a way to first enhance the sound of the drum kit, because the closed hats have a different frequency response from the kick and snare, so it becomes like wider. And then second, this kind of fills the voice that we have in our pattern with kick and snare. However, it's kind of boring now because of the same reason. It doesn't have variations, and also the velocity stays the same. So I tweaked it a little bit, and now it's much better. Play around with it, add variation every so and so. It doesn't need to be exactly like this, but it needs to sound spicy and varied. Then another thing I added is open hats. Now, I didn't use a lot of them in the track, but I tried to sprinkle them in the parts where I really want something to stand out. So in this case, the open hats are playing with the melody of the choir, like. So that's the idea. I also have another example, a beautiful example of how I use the open hats. Here, there's sort of like a breakdown that does something like this. Okay, and that's nice, but I wanted it to open a bit more, so I did this. So it kind of plays with our choir, and it just opens up our track because the open hats has such high frequencies. And when you have high frequencies like coming up like that, it opens up your track. Another thing that you notice is that these open hats are alternating them with something else. So you have bam, bam, bam. This is called ride. In this case, I just used it to alternate with the open hats, because I didn't like the fact that when the hats were not playing, nothing was happening. Because if you have something like this, like, right, you feel there's something missing. This is the breakdown part. I removed the kick and the kick and snare pattern. So when you have that problem, like you have a part of your track where it's like a breakdown, so you cannot be super loud with PERCS, and you still want to maintain the rhythm, it's a good idea to use the thinner layers of percussion, in this case the closed hats, to preserve the rhythm. That's the reason why in this part I'm doing this thing. And basically, these are just alternating with the open hats, okay? So that's the reason. Hi-hats can be great for that. And then a last thing I added are the toms. In the way I use the toms, I think they're awesome for transitions. Like, for example, before the breakdown, there's this part, okay? Okay, so you feel, okay, this is a transition. And a cool way to enhance transition is adding this sort of thing. Basically, it's like, like when drummers do that, or they do something faster. It's awesome. It just sounds very interesting. It sounds like the end of a statement. So I added that with toms, and as you've seen, like it's not just the same tom sample. It's like 4 different samples. So, you know, like that kind of vibe. And I think they're very awesome for that. But, you know, when I add toms, I do I don't add snares at the same time. Like if I'm doing obviously the drummer is not going to have free hands to play the snares too. So, you know, I do toms and kicks together because the kicks, you play them with your legs. So that's why it does sort of like that thing. And then the last thing I did is, of course, I layered this a bit. So I have Superior Drummer 3, which is an amazing library here. I'm going to talk about it way more maybe in the next videos or something. And it's cool because it comes with many different kits. I just picked one that I like. And this is how it sounds like. But then I also layered it with the Metropolis Arc 1, which also has a drum kit. Sadly, Arc 1 doesn't have like many different kits, so it doesn't have MIDI loops like Superior Drummer 3 or an advanced mixer or whatever, but it still sounds pretty okay to me. This sounds way different from Superior Drummer 3, so when you put them together, have a nice effect. There's also like trader hits and whatever, so... But yeah, that's pretty much what I did to make the drums work. I hope you learned something from this video. If you want to learn more about how to write for percussion, there's lots of tutorials about that on my channel. And there's also lots of tutorials about how to write great orchestral music. So feel free to check the rest of the channel. I'll see you in the next video.